ask, like, oh, what do you do? Like, oh, I help people start mini governments. I thought that the world was wrong and it needed to change towards the route of liberty. The main point I realized was that instead of just arguing about, the world that I wanted, or complaining about it, or thinking how bad things were, the whole point was to do it. The Startup Studies Foundation is a think tank that studies small forms of experimental governments, which includes things like special economic zones, city-states, eco-villages, and communes and intentional communities.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Joe McKinney from Startup Society Foundation. Very excited because Joe is really a man of the future. And I'll let you introduce yourself. So Joe, what do you do? Where are you at the moment? What are you up to?
So my name is Joe McKinney, like Lee said. I'm the CEO of the Startup Studies Foundation. The Startup Studies Foundation is a think tank that studies small forms of experimental governments, which includes things like special economic zones, city-states, eco-villages, and communes and intentional communities. Another thing that I do is I'm the CEO of New Hans Network, which is a for-profit company that creates blockchain applications for Startup Society projects. So that's what I'm focusing on right now. The Startup Studies Foundation, it does academic content through the Institute for Competitive Governance, does popular content through its website and social media, and it conducts conferences. Our latest conference series has been a way to create a consortium of partners that would help create sustainable startup cities in Puerto Rico to help it economically and infrastructurally develop in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that a bit, because it's probably a good example to look at closer. And can you explain a bit what exactly is, or I mean, you mentioned a couple of forms of startup societies, but maybe a private city as an example. So how does this exactly work, and what does someone who has really never heard about this need to understand in order to grasp the concept?
Well, like different structure, different for-profit businesses, there's different models of a private city. But the basic concept is that rather than a city having no owners or having owners that circulate through traditional public processes, you have an ownership of it from private individuals who have shares in it and actually get financial returns off of it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's only for that it's solely for the benefit of people who own the city. Quite the contrary. The whole point is that the economic incentives align, that it was beneficial for the residents of it, and that's how people who own the city actually receive dividends from it. Usually,
just recently, quickly to interrupt here, Zug. I think there was a press release about Zug in Switzerland doing voting now on blockchain. Can you break it down even more? So I wanna have it even simpler explained.
Okay.
That would this entail that I, as a citizen, basically have more direct influence in the decision making of, say, urban development, or you talk very abstract. So can you make it even easier for the audience?
Sure. I mean, for a citizen, again, the models differ, but instead of having a social contract, they have an actual contract. And when they enter into the city, they have to sign a contract about what the rules are of the private city. Mm-hmm. That may entail that they have more say in their private city. They may have a voting mechanism. If they have shares, that would certainly be the case. But in the case of private cities and startup societies generally, if you don't like it, you can leave. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because it is so small. It is easy to leave, and because of that, they have an incentive to actually respect their customers or their citizens' needs.
So what are the main USPs at the moment of those projects? What would they do differently to a traditional city?
For one, instead of having a government that's voted by democratic means or public means, they would have owners, investors that would invest initially in the special economic zone, the private special economic zone or private city. And they would often include, they would create a lot of the legislation, and they would be doing most of the governing within the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's something in general very, very, it's definitely futuristic. Yeah. I think at the moment, wherever you live in the world, you might not be able to imagine that that's a possible way to go. How realistic do you see this approach, and when and what's your personal expectation when the transition basically could happen?
I mean, this model already exists in multiple facets. On the lower level, we have HOAs, which are homeowner associations, which are private cities essentially that are owned by private individuals and often owned by shares by the people who live there. But they don't have extensive rule sets. They may have private infrastructure. They might have different rules built on top of the existing host nation. There's already existing private special economic zones that exist all around the world. And in fact, in the developing world, there is more private special economic zones than public special economic zones as a form of a private city. So they already exist right now. The point is whether it'll be widespread to the majority of citizens. I would say the tipping point, because of, well, I'm very enthusiastic about the project. I would say in about 20 years, I would say that majority of governance would be some sort of zone-based governance, privately, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And what's your personal, like, what drives you to do all this? Is there like, do you have a dream personally, or I mean, of course, you really like you're completely immersed in that space, but is there something remarkable, maybe also from your personal experience or background that makes you so dedicated, pushing these ideas? What's different in your private city, in your future scenario that you want for yourself, basically?
Well, the reason I started all this is because of I was heavily politically active on the libertarian side, and I wanted to make a lot of change. I thought that the world was wrong and it needed to change towards the route of liberty. I'm still a big fan of liberty. I'm not a libertarian any longer. But the main point I realized was that instead of just arguing about, the world that I wanted or complaining about it or thinking how bad things were, the whole point was to do it. And it seemed a lot of people in the liberty movement get a lot more pleasure out of complaining about things than actually doing things or testing their ideas out. So the logical extension of startup societies is if you have an idea of how the world should operate, you should try it on a small scale. And if it works on a small scale, then it can scale even further. But if you can't do it even on a small scale and no one's willing to participate in it, then it shouldn't work. So that's the point of startup societies. Instead of just bickering about it, you demonstrate it. And if it doesn't work, then you know that idea doesn't work. And if it does work, then it's a demonstration to the world that that idea is fruitful.
So that invites a complete spectrum, whether it's a basic income, startup society, or whatever technology. But you would still have to do it. But if I understand it right, really the underlying philosophy is, okay, instead of just discussing it, we need to find ways and strategies to, in our lifetime, make it a thing, make it real.
No, totally. I mean, what's the point of having ideas if they aren't actually being enacted? It's just it's a little bit masturbatory, to be completely honest. And I entered a lot of people who got into philosophical discussions, but they really sort of didn't realize the point of having discussions to begin with. So yeah, the steps, the initial steps are the most difficult steps, I would argue. And it mainly is securing some sort of autonomy that allows for experimentation in different policies. Now, that doesn't mean sovereignty, and I would not recommend that people go for sovereignty. The main route that we study is special economic zones, which is get a degree of autonomy by securing concessions from host nations. So that's the first step normally, is that you go to a government and go through negotiation process so you can secure concessions, so you can say, these are the types of policies we would like to enact. This is for how long we would like to do it. Here's the requirements. Here's the piece of land that we would do it on. Now, there's multiple ways that can make this process easier, but it is fairly hard to negotiate with governments because of the number one asset that governments have is their land.
When you talk to people that don't know anything about it, what's the reaction?
Initially, a little confusion, but then the wonderful thing about startup society is that there's been examples since the beginning of history. You just mentioned, Hong Kong, Singapore, and if you're in the United States, it's actually fairly simple. You say, America used to be 13 startup societies. Actually, used to be many more startup societies, and everyone immediately gets like, okay, no, I get it. So the focus isn't necessarily on the definition, which is admittedly very vague. A small experimental government. It's to focus on the concrete examples.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this, and that's why a couple of weeks ago I had a little party which was a charity party, and we collected some money. And now, Joe, the Startup Society is a charitable foundation, right?
Correct.
And you have a QR code that I can send some some Bitcoin on to make for the greater good, for the big cause, for the future. So if you could show me that QR code, I'm gonna send with my phone right here. I'm gonna send you some. I put it I hold it in the camera. I'll send him some Bitcoin.
Perfect.
So, and for everyone who's watching now, here you can see scanning. For everyone watching now, I have to switch maybe. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I'm screen sharing right now.
I got the QR code, and I put, it's just a small donation, but for the sake of the Bitcoin transaction, so that everyone sees how it works, we put the amount in, and then we hit the send button. It was a good hangout, Joe. Thank you very much for your time. Definitely do another one because I still have some questions. Maybe we do one together with our community live. So the people from the Bitcoin Club and in Malta can also ask some direct questions. But I wish you a great last bit of the Sunday.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lee. Hope everything's
Pleasure.
well.